The dogs charged, but the man didn't even flinch. That's what witnesses would later say about the day everything went wrong. And then unbelievably right. It was supposed to be a quiet evening, the kind where the sunset paints the sky orange, cars roll lazily through a small-town intersection, and families walk home carrying dinner groceries and laughing about their day. Nothing out of the ordinary, just a peaceful, simple end to another day. But then came the sirens. They sliced through the calm like a blade. People turned. Conversations stopped. Even the birds in the trees seemed to pause. And at the center of that rising tension stood a black man named Marcus Hale, beside his silver sedan, hands visible, breathing steady, confused but composed. A call had come into the police station minutes earlier. Suspicious man near the hardware store. No crime reported. No threat mentioned, just suspicion. Within minutes, 3 police cruisers pulled up, tires screeching. Officers jumped out, hands already on weapons, voices already raised, even though Marcus hadn't moved a muscle. He tried to speak, tried to ask what was going on, but nobody cared to listen. To them, the caller's fear was enough. And then it happened. Before Marcus could even open his mouth fully, one of the officers shouted, "He's not complying. Release the dogs." His words hit the air like a detonator. The K9 unit's doors swung open. 2 German shepherds exploded out, their powerful bodies launching into the street. Their snarls echoed off storefront windows. Shoppers screamed and scrambled backward. A mother shielded her child. A man dragged his wife behind a parked truck. Everyone braced for the worst. Everyone except Marcus. He didn't run. He didn't tremble. He didn't even blink. Instead, he inhaled slowly, deep, controlled, and whispered words no one else could have predicted. "Easy, I know your language." The dogs closed the distance fast, claws scratching asphalt, teeth glinting under the fading sunlight. People thought they were seconds from watching a tragedy. But Marcus didn't step back. He lowered his shoulders, angled his body, not in fear but in familiarity, like someone who had stood in this exact moment 1,000 times before. Like someone who understood the storm coming toward him, and wasn't afraid of it. Because the truth was simple. A truth nobody there knew. A truth that changed everything. Marcus wasn't just some random man running errands. He was a decorated former U.S. military K9 handler, a specialist who had spent over a decade training some of the most disciplined and dangerous dogs in the world. Dogs who worked in deserts, in war zones, in darkness, in chaos. Dogs who followed commands in gunfire, in explosions, in life-and-death missions. He had trained more than 60 dogs, each one capable of identifying explosives, chasing armed targets, and saving lives under unimaginable pressure. The officers had no idea. They thought they were unleashing force. But they were unleashing instinct. Instinct. Marcus understood better than anyone on that street. They had no idea whose territory they had stepped into, no idea whose instincts they had just challenged, no idea that the man standing calmly in front of 2 charging K9s was the one person those dogs might actually listen to. And the moment the dogs reached him, everything the officers believed shattered. The K9s sprinted toward Marcus with full force, muscles tight, teeth bared, fur standing like electric wires. Their paws pounded the pavement with the intensity of a battlefield charge. Every witness felt the terror of those seconds stretched like an eternity. But then Marcus moved. Not a big step, not a panicked jump, a small, precise shift to the left. Shoulders lowered, weight centered, eyes steady. A stance any soldier would recognize instantly, but none of the officers did. And then came his voice, firm, sharp, unshakable. "Stay!" The sound cut through the chaos like a command the wind itself obeyed. What happened next looked impossible. The dogs, lunging forward with full aggression, suddenly halted. They skidded in the dust, claws scraping asphalt, momentum crashing into confusion. One whined. The other tilted its head, ears flicking back as if it suddenly recognized a superior authority. People froze mid-scream. Phones recording shook in disbelief. A bag of groceries dropped, apples rolling across the street. It was as if the world itself had stopped breathing. Marcus didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't look proud. He simply lifted a hand and gave the next command. Down. Both police dogs instantly lowered themselves to the ground, elbows tucked, heads lifted but obedient. Perfect textbook compliance. The kind of response that normally took months of disciplined training to master. The street fell into a silence, so deep you could hear someone's car radio from half a block away. An officer, eyes wide, managed to choke out, how did he? Marcus gave a calm exhale, the kind a man gives when he knows exactly what he's doing and exactly how to do it. Because indeed, he did. Every movement he made, every tone in his voice, every ounce of confidence was honed over years in Afghanistan, years walking through dust storms with military K9s, years training dogs to detect explosives buried in rubble, years learning their body language, their fears, their instincts, years trusting them with his life and earning their trust in return. To Marcus, these two police dogs weren't weapons. They were just confused professionals following loud commands in the wrong situation. He slowly approached the dogs. Not hurried, not hesitant, confident, measured, respectful. The shepherd on the left lowered its head, sniffing his hand. Marcus smiled softly and scratched it behind the ear. A gentle, familiar touch only a real handler knew how to give. "They're good boys," he said, voice low and warm. "They just didn't need to be used today." A wave of shock swept the crowd. A woman whispered, "Did they just obey him instead of the police?" A teenager muttered, "Bro's like a dog Jedi." A man whispered, "I ain't never seen anything like that in my life." Even the officers, who seconds earlier had been barking orders, stood frozen, faces shifting between embarrassment, awe, and confusion. Their hands hung uselessly at their belts. Their K9 handler looked like someone had unplugged his brain. This wasn't normal. This wasn't in their training manuals, and it definitely wasn't something they could explain in a report. But the story wasn't over. Not even close. Marcus rose to his full height, dusting off his hands. His voice remained calm, neutral, yet carried a weight that demanded attention. "You used them too soon," he said, not accusing, simply stating fact. "They're tools for danger, not fear." His words hit harder than any punch could, and suddenly everyone watching realized something crystal clear. This man wasn't just someone who knew dogs. He was someone dogs respected, someone they trusted on instinct, someone who had command not just over animals, but over chaos itself. And the officers? They had no idea who they had just tried to intimidate. But they were about to learn. Marcus finally explained himself. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't defend himself with anger or frustration. Instead, he simply pointed toward the open trunk of his car. Inside sat a neatly arranged toolbox, a rag, and a roll of duct tape. "I'm repairing my neighbor's window," he said quietly. "She's an elderly woman. Her kids moved away. I help her with housework." His words weren't dramatic. They weren't defensive. They were just honest. And somehow, that honesty stung more than any argument ever could. A few of the officers exchanged awkward glances. People in the crowd held their breath, feeling the weight of the truth settle over the street like a cold fog. The caller had assumed the worst, simply because Marcus didn't look like he belonged in that quiet suburb. The truth was simple and painful. He wasn't suspicious. He was helping someone. Marcus wasn't angry as he spoke, just disappointed. Deeply, visibly disappointed. The kind of disappointment that made even the loudest officer shift uncomfortably. He looked around at the officers and said with quiet authority, "You didn't ask a single question. You just acted." His voice wasn't sharp. It wasn't bitter, but it cut sharper than any shout could have. Every officer felt it. Officer Reyes, the K9 handler, the man who had unleashed the dogs, looked especially shaken. His jaw clenched, then unclenched. His eyes dropped to the pavement, then slowly lifted. But he wasn't furious at Marcus. He was furious at himself. He took a slow step forward, his face shadowed with regret, and spoke with a voice that cracked slightly. I apologize. We were told you were resisting. We misjudged the situation. It was the closest thing to a confession anyone expected from him. Marcus didn't smirk. He didn't throw the moment in Rhea's face. He simply nodded, accepting the apology, but not letting it erase the lesson. "It happens," Marcus said softly. "But you put your dogs in danger too. They trust you. Don't break that trust." The sentence hit harder than a slap. Reyes flinched, not physically but emotionally. He looked down at his two canine partners, who were still lying calmly beside Marcus, tails gently tapping the ground like they'd found an old friend. Reyes swallowed hard. He knew Marcus was right. Those dogs would follow him into burning buildings, into gunfire, into life-and-death situations without hesitation. And he had used them not because of a threat, but because of a misunderstanding, because of fear, because of assumptions. The shame in his eyes told everyone he understood that now. Around them the crowd murmured, whispers mixing with gasps, cell phones still raised. People were already uploading videos, narrating the moment, discussing how the dogs had stopped, how Marcus had commanded them, how the officers were now standing in uncomfortable silence. This wasn't just a moment. It was a story unfolding in real time, a story about misjudgment, a story about discipline, a story about the unexpected power of calmness. And Marcus, he had saved not only himself from a disastrous confrontation, but he had also protected the department's own dogs from being forced into an unnecessary conflict. That realization was spreading through the crowd like a wave. Someone whispered, "He saved the dogs more than they saved him." Another murmured, "Those officers didn't even know who they were messing with." And in the middle of the growing conversation, Marcus stood quietly, calm, composed, unbothered by the cameras, simply waiting for the officers to gather themselves. The truth was clear to everyone watching. This man didn't just control the dogs, he controlled the entire situation. With nothing but experience, discipline, and calm. And the officers had no idea what kind of man they had just underestimated. After the chaos settled and the street returned to something resembling normal, Officer Reyes finally gathered the courage to approach Marcus again. His face still carried the shock of what he had witnessed, shock, mixed with respect he couldn't hide even if he tried. He cleared his throat. "Where did you learn to command them like that?" Marcus gave a faint, almost nostalgic smile. "I served overseas," he said. "Military canine unit. These dogs here, they're trained on the same fundamentals. Body language, tone, respect." Reyes blinked, trying to process the connection between this quiet man and the unbelievable, seen from moments earlier. "So you were a handler?" "For 12 years, Marcus replied. "I've worked with dogs more loyal than most humans. They're not weapons, they're partners." His voice carried warmth, pride, and something deeper, experience born from years in places most civilians would never step foot in. Marcus knelt beside the two, Kunz, Max, and Shadow, the very dogs that had charged at him minutes earlier. Now, instead of growling, they lay stretched out on the pavement like oversized puppies, tails sweeping back and forth in soft, pleased motions. Marcus scratched behind Max's ear. "There you go, big guy," he said softly, and the shepherd leaned into the touch. Then something happened that made the entire crowd gasp. Shadow, the more aggressive of the two, pressed his head firmly under Marcus's arm, twisting and nudging like a dog greeting an old friend coming home from deployment. The crowd erupted into an unplanned chorus of "Oh!" Even the officers who minutes earlier had been rigid and stern found themselves smiling, genuine smiles, not forced ones. A grandmother watching from the sidewalk lifted her phone to record, whispering, "Now this is what they should show on the news." Reyes exhaled heavily, running a hand through his hair. "You just taught us a lesson we won't forget." There was no sarcasm, no defensiveness, just humility. Marcus didn't reply immediately. He simply stroked the dog's fur as they lay beside him like loyal guardians. The moment felt peaceful, almost sacred. But that peace was shattered when a black SUV screeched to a stop at the edge of the scene. The back door flew open. An older man in a sharply pressed police captain's uniform stepped out, his face red, jaw locked, eyes furious. He stormed toward the group, shouting, What happened here? Why are my canines off leash? Why is half the town recording? Who authorized this? Reyes stiffened like a soldier standing at attention. Captain, sir, we had a misunderstanding. The dogs were deployed too early, but... The captain cut him off. Deployed too early? They are trained officers. You put them at risk, and the department at risk. Then his eyes landed on Marcus, a stranger, a civilian, the center of the storm. And who are you? The captain demanded. Before Marcus could speak, the crowd jumped in like a protective shield. He saved your dogs. He stopped them with his voice. He's military. He trained dogs overseas. He handled them better than the actual handler. The captain raised a hand, trying to silence the rising wave of voices, but it was too late. Phones were recording every second. People were stepping forward to defend Marcus with raw honesty. Reyes swallowed hard and finally said it aloud. Sir, he stopped the dogs with a single command. Both of them. The captain blinked, stunned. He turned to Marcus. You did what? Marcus stood, brushing dust from his knees. I didn't do anything special, he said. I just spoke their language. But the biggest twist, the one that would change everything, came seconds later. A teenager who had witnessed everything, feeling both terrified and amazed, held up his phone and captured the entire encounter, from start to finish. By the time he got home, his hands were still shaking, but he knew the world needed to see what really happened. He posted the video online with a caption that immediately grabbed attention. They unleashed the dogs, but the dogs chose him. Within minutes, his notifications exploded. Hundreds of likes, then thousands, then millions. Within hours, the video spread across the internet like wildfire. People couldn't believe what they were watching. A man standing firm as two highly trained police dogs charged toward him, and then, obeying him, instead of their handlers. Comments flooded in. Who is this guy? This is the calmest man on earth. The dogs trusted him instantly. Amazing. Police need him to train them. This is what real discipline looks like. And then the headlines came. News stations began running the clip on repeat. Anchors couldn't stop discussing the confidence in Marcus's voice, the way the dogs lay down instantly, and how he handled the entire situation without fear or aggression. They gave him names like the Dog Whisperer Veteran, the man who stopped canines with his voice, and the calm in the chaos. Interviews poured in from every direction, TV networks, online magazines, podcasts, even animal behavior organizations eager to hear his insights. But Marcus didn't want the spotlight. He didn't chase the attention. When reporters stuck microphones in his face, expecting a dramatic speech, he stayed grounded, humble, and focused. I don't want apologies, he said simply. I want change. Train officers better. Respect the communities they serve. And protect the dogs. They don't choose the orders they follow. Those words spread even faster than the video. Soon conversations erupted nationwide. People debated how police interactions could improve, how communication matters more than force, and how trained canines deserved handlers who understood them deeply. Experts invited Marcus to panels. Dog trainers quoted his lines. Community leaders praised his courage. Marcus didn't yell. He didn't shame. He simply educated. And that made his message even more powerful. A week later, the unexpected happened. The police department, that had nearly caused a tragedy, reached out with an official letter and a proposal. They wanted Marcus to join them, not as a token figure, not as a PR stunt, but as a professional K9 trainer. They offered him a full contract to reorganize their entire K9 division, retrain the dogs, and, more importantly, train the officers who would be handling them. When Marcus sat across from the chief and the city officials, they asked, "Will you accept?" Marcus didn't hesitate long, but he made one condition clear. "We train the handlers too. The dogs already know what they're doing." There was silence, then nods, then applause. Everyone knew it was the right call. And so the man who stood fearless in front of charging canines became the man who helped reshape an entire unit, turning chaos into progress. conflict into learning, and fear into respect. His story became more than a viral video. It became a lesson, a blueprint, a reminder that calm can overpower fear, knowledge can prevent danger, and respect, given and earned, can change everything. In the end, Marcus didn't just control 2 dogs. He changed an entire system, one command at a time.